Picture a device the size of a shoebox that can keep perfect military grade time for 2 straight weeks without ever touching a GPS signal. No satellite link, no ground station, nothing that an enemy can jam, spoof, or knock out with a single well-placed attack. That is not a concept from a defense contractor's pitch deck. It is a real prototype that has already been built, already been tested in the field, and is now being handed off for mass production under a brand new DARPA program. The age of total dependence on GPS for military timing may be quietly coming to an end, and almost nobody outside the defense and quantum sensing world has noticed yet. Let's start with the problem this technology is actually solving, because it is bigger than most people realize. Nearly every modern military system depends on precise, synchronized timing to function. High-tech missiles, radar systems, aircraft, ships, artillery, and communication networks all rely on knowing the exact time down to fractions of a second in order to calculate position, coordinate strikes, and synchronize with other units. Today, almost all of that timing comes from GPS satellites, which carry their own onboard atomic clocks and broadcast precisely timed signals down to receivers on the ground. It works beautifully right up until someone decides to jam it, spoof it, or take out the satellites entirely. And in modern conflict zones, GPS jamming has stopped being a rare worst-case scenario. It has become routine. That vulnerability is exactly what DARPA is moving to close, and the agency just took its most concrete step yet. In early August 2026, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency announced a new program called It's About Time, aimed at establishing a pilot, manufacturing pipeline for tactical-grade optical atomic clocks, sometimes referred to as quantum clocks. Unlike traditional GPS clocks, which use microwave transitions and alkali atoms, a technology that has barely changed in 50 years, optical clocks use much higher frequency optical transitions in atoms like iodine, giving them resolution and long-term stability that DARPA researchers say is roughly 4 orders of magnitude better than what current GPS satellite clocks provide. To lead this manufacturing push, DARPA selected IonQ, the quantum computing company that had already acquired a specialized quantum sensing and timing firm called Vector Atomic. That acquisition turned out to be extremely well-timed. Vector Atomic has spent years quietly proving that optical clocks can survive outside a laboratory. Back in July 2022, while still an independent startup funded by DARPA since 2019, the company demonstrated an iodine-based optical clock running continuously aboard a naval vessel during the RIMPAC military exercise for 20 straight days, marking the first optical clock ever to survive real-world shipboard conditions. Then, in November 2023, Vector Atomic brought what is described as the world's first commercial rack-mount optical clock to market. This was not theoretical science sitting in a university lab. This was hardware already proving itself in operational military environments years before this latest announcement. So, what exactly did DARPA unveil this time? 2 distinct clock prototypes, each built for a different operational role. The first is the one that grabbed headlines, a genuinely shoebox-sized unit designed for airborne or spaceborne platforms, small enough to fit into aircraft or satellites without demanding major redesigns. According to DARPA, this compact unit can maintain GPS-level timing accuracy for up to 2 full weeks completely independent of any satellite signal. The second prototype is considerably larger, roughly the size of a washing machine, designed to serve as a regional master clock supporting land and sea operations. This bigger unit is even more impressive on endurance, capable of holding accurate timing for more than 6 months without external correction. Together, these two form a tiered system, a compact mobile unit for platforms that move, and a larger, longer-lasting anchor clock for regional infrastructure. It's worth pausing on just how significant that shrinking has been. This program builds directly on DARPA's 2022 Robust Optical Clock Network Initiative, which first proved these devices could be compressed down from bulky, chunky lab configurations into genuinely portable field units. What used to require a room full of specialized equipment now fits into something you could carry onto a plane. These prototypes have since gone through extensive testing, both in national laboratories and out in real field conditions, according to DARPA's own program announcement, which is exactly why the agency now feels confident enough to shift focus away from proving the science works and toward the much harder problem of actually manufacturing these things at scale. And that shift is really the heart of this story. DARPA's program manager for this initiative, Mukund Vengalatore, put it bluntly in the official program announcement. No one has successfully attempted to scale quantum manufacturing before, because integrating, miniaturizing, and ruggedizing the complex quantum adjacent components inside these clocks, things like advanced lasers and integrated photonics, is exceptionally difficult even within a single working prototype, let alone across dozens or hundreds of identical field-ready units. Building one perfect optical clock in a lab is one kind of achievement. Building 125 identical units that all perform reliably in the field is an entirely different engineering challenge, and it is the exact problem this new contract is designed to solve. The dollar figures attached to this effort tell you how seriously the Pentagon is treating it. IonQ secured a $58 million contract from DARPA under the It's About Time program, announced in early August 2026, specifically to build out this manufacturing pipeline. But that number only makes sense alongside another move IonQ made just days earlier. On July 31st, 2026, IonQ completed a $1.8 billion acquisition of Skywater Technology, which happens to be the largest exclusively United States-based semiconductor foundry in the country, carrying Defense Microelectronics Activity Category 1A, Trusted Foundry Accreditation. In plain terms, IonQ did not just win a government contract to build quantum clocks. It bought the domestic security-cleared factory capacity needed to actually manufacture them at scale, entirely inside the United States, without depending on any foreign supply chain. That timing was almost certainly not a coincidence. Acquiring a fully accredited, trusted domestic semiconductor foundry right before landing a DARPA manufacturing contract for sensitive military hardware suggests this was a deliberate, coordinated strategy, not a lucky break. It also tells you something important about where this technology is headed next. This is not just about building better clocks. It is about building an entirely self-contained American manufacturing base for quantum sensing hardware, one that does not rely on chips or components sourced from potentially adversarial supply chains, at a moment when the United States government has become increasingly focused on exactly that kind of technological independence. So when will these clocks actually reach military units in the field? According to DARPA's own timeline, the dedicated manufacturing facility under this program is planned to open by mid-2027, with production units expected to become available roughly 1 year after that facility is completed. That means the fully scaled version of this technology is still a couple of years away from widespread deployment. But make no mistake, the hard part, proving that optical clocks can survive real-world military conditions and actually outperform GPS-level timing without any satellite involvement, has already been done. What's happening now is the transition from proven prototype to repeatable, mass-producible hardware, which historically has been the single hardest bottleneck standing between quantum sensing research and real operational deployment. This fits into a much larger pattern within DARPA's broader positioning, navigation, and timing research. Optical clocks are just one piece of a wider push the agency has been running for years under a program called Quantum Assisted Sensing and Readout, aimed at making ultra-accurate atomic clocks genuinely portable rather than confined to specialized laboratories. Physicists involved in this research have noted that these newer optical transition-based clocks offer resolution and stability roughly 10,000 times better than the aging microwave-based clocks currently flying on GPS satellites. When you put that number next to the shoebox-sized prototype DARPA just tested, you start to understand why the Pentagon considers this one of the more strategically important quantum technologies in active development right now, arguably more immediately useful than quantum computers themselves, which are still years away from delivering practical military advantage. Step back and look at the bigger picture here. For decades, the entire American military, and frankly most of the world's civilian infrastructure too, has been quietly dependent on a small constellation of GPS satellites for something as fundamental as knowing what time it is with precision. That single point of dependency has always been a strategic weakness, and modern adversaries know it, which is exactly why GPS jamming and spoofing have become such common tactics in contested regions around the world. A shoebox-sized device that can maintain that same level of timing precision, completely independent of any satellite, for 2 full weeks at a stretch, represents a genuine structural fix to that vulnerability, not just an incremental upgrade. What makes this story worth watching closely over the next few years is not just the technology itself, but the manufacturing model DARPA is now testing. If IonQ and Vector Atomic can prove that quantum sensing hardware, notoriously difficult to standardize and mass produce, can actually be built at scale using domestic, trusted foundry infrastructure, the playbook will not stay limited to clocks. It becomes a template for scaling up an entire category of quantum sensors, including magnetometers, quantum inertial navigation systems, and other GPS-denied positioning technologies that are currently stuck exactly where optical clocks were a few years ago, proven in the lab, but not yet proven at scale. It also helps to understand where optical clocks fit inside the wider quantum sensing landscape the Pentagon has been quietly building out. Alongside timing, DARPA and its industry partners have been developing quantum inertial navigation systems designed to offer drift rates orders of magnitude lower than the fiber optic and ring laser gyroscopes that make up today's standard backup navigation hardware. Those traditional gyroscopes accumulate positioning drift on the order of nautical miles per hour once GPS is unavailable, which is tolerable for a short maneuver, but becomes a serious liability across a long transit at sea or in the air. Quantum-based alternatives, including hybrid systems that combine magnetic anomaly mapping with artificial intelligence, and 6 axis inertial measurement units built around cold atom sensors, are being developed in parallel with these optical clocks, all aimed at the same underlying goal, giving American military platforms a way to know exactly where they are and exactly what time it is, even when every satellite signal in the sky has been jammed into silence. That is precisely why defense officials describe this work in such direct strategic terms. As one DARPA statement put it, precision timekeeping and synchronized communication that operate independently of GPS in contested environments creates what officials call unparalleled resilience for American warfighters. That phrase is not marketing language. In a real conflict against a technologically capable adversary, the side that can still coordinate missile timing, radar synchronization, and communications, after GPS goes dark, holds an enormous tactical advantage over the side that suddenly cannot. Optical clocks are being built specifically to make sure that advantage belongs to the United States rather than to whoever manages to jam the sky first. There is also a quiet manufacturing story unfolding here that deserves more attention than it's getting. Quantum sensing as an industry has spent years struggling with exactly the problem DARPA's program manager described: the enormous gap between building one working prototype in a lab and reliably producing dozens or hundreds of field-ready units that all perform identically. Most quantum hardware companies today are still assembling devices in small batches using highly specialized teams, with little in the way of standardized testing, calibration, or production tooling. That approach works for research, but it completely breaks down the moment a branch of the military needs to equip an entire fleet of aircraft or a full naval flotilla with matching hardware. DARPA's decision to fund a dedicated manufacturing facility, rather than simply ordering more prototypes, signals that the agency now sees standardized production, not further scientific discovery, as the real bottleneck standing between this technology and the battlefield. It is also worth putting the wider quantum sensing industry in perspective, because optical clocks are not developing in isolation. Government and defense funding still dominates the customer base across quantum sensing broadly, but the strongest near-term commercial applications outside defense are showing up in areas like mineral exploration, biomedical imaging, and satellite navigation support. Some of the companies working alongside this DARPA effort have raised well over $100 million each in private funding, with at least one prominent quantum sensing firm completing a public offering. Earlier this year, a sign that investors increasingly see this category, not just quantum computing itself, as the nearer-term payoff from decades of quantum physics research. Optical clocks sit right at the center of that shift, a technology mature enough to leave the lab, funded seriously enough to reach mass production, and strategically important enough that the Pentagon is willing to help a company buy its own domestic chip foundry just to make sure the supply chain never becomes a vulnerability. None of this guarantees smooth sailing between now and 2027. Standing up a brand new manufacturing facility for hardware this delicate, involving advanced lasers, integrated photonics, and components that have to survive shipboard vibration, temperature swings, and combat conditions, is exactly the kind of engineering challenge that has stalled other promising defense technologies before. DARPA itself has acknowledged that nobody has successfully scaled quantum manufacturing before, which means this program is as much a test of whether America's industrial base can execute at this level as it is a test of the underlying physics. But the fact that DARPA is willing to commit real money and a real timeline to that test, backed by a company that just bought its own trusted domestic foundry, suggests this is being treated less like a research bet and more like an infrastructure project the Pentagon considers inevitable. If you found this breakdown useful, do not forget to like and subscribe, because we are going to keep tracking this manufacturing pipeline as it moves toward that 2027 facility opening and exactly how fast the Pentagon manages to break its dependence on GPS. Because the shoebox sitting in a DARPA lab today might end up being the reason an entire generation of American weapons systems never has to worry about losing their signal again.